head exploding in milliseconds, a throat sliced for 10 agonizing seconds, and one death so brutal that victims stay awake while being literally torn apart. But I'm gonna dive into science and reveal why the most painful way to die in horror isn't what you would think. So here we are, starting with what looks like one of the most brutal deaths ever put on film. David Cronenberg's 1981 masterpiece Scanners gave us the head explosion that became every horror fan's favorite gif. You know the one. Guy sits in a chair, his face twists up, and then boom, his head turns into a blood fountain. It's gross, it's shocking, and it looks painful as hell. But here's the thing that's gonna mess with your head more than any scanner ever could. This death is actually the least painful one in this video. Yeah, you heard that right. The most famous exploding head in cinema history is basically the express lane to the afterlife. Let me blow your mind the same way that guy's head got blown. The human brain, that 3-pound lump of meat that keeps you from walking into traffic, has 0 pain receptors. None. It's one of the only organs in your body that can't feel pain. Surgeons can poke around in there all day while you're awake and you won't feel a thing. Actually, if you've ever had brain surgery, which I hope you haven't because that would be bad, but if you did, I hope you're okay now, you're gonna be awake for that. That's a terrifying concept. Now, before you start thinking this sounds pleasant, hold up. The stuff around your brain, that's a different story. Your scalp has more nerve endings than a helicopter parent has opinions. The meninges, or I don't know how to pronounce it because I didn't have a good education, which they're the protective layers wrapped around your brain, are packed with pain receptors. So when your head decides to become a special effect, those tissues are sending every pain signal they've got through something called the trigeminal nerve. Think of the trigeminal nerve as your face's emergency broadcast system. When something goes wrong up there, this nerve starts screaming at maximum volume at every part of your head. We're talking about a massive pain signal that would normally make you pass out just from the intensity. But here's the cruel joke. Your head exploding generates this enormous pain signal at the exact same moment it destroys the thing that processes pain signals. The whole explosion happens faster than you can blink. We're talking milliseconds here. Your consciousness gets deleted before your brain can even register what's happening. It's like someone unplugging your computer right as you're about to save your work. Except instead of losing a document, you're losing your entire existence. The special effects team back in 1981 had to get creative to make this look real. They tried plaster heads, wax heads, and eventually settled on gelatin filled with latex scraps and old hamburgers. One guy actually laid under the dummy and shot it with a 12-gauge shotgun loaded with salt. That's right, they literally shotgunned a fake head to create the most famous death scene in horror. The irony is perfect. What looks like the worst way to die is actually nature's version of hitting the off switch. No suffering, no drawn out agony, just instant lights out. Your brain goes from thinking about taxes or what to have for dinner or that weird thing you didn't grade for that you never want to think about again to not existing anymore, all in the time that it takes light to travel a few feet. But unfortunately, our next victim gets precious seconds to contemplate their fate. Now we get to meet Keith Jennings, photographer and soon to be victim of what might be the cleanest decapitation in cinema history. Poor Keith gets his head sliced off by a sheet of glass that apparently took physics classes, because the amount of force needed to do this is absolutely ridiculous. Here's where things get interesting for all you folks who think getting your head chopped off is instant lights out. Science has some bad news for you. Recent studies show that after decapitation, your brain keeps working for a few seconds. We're talking 3 to 4 seconds of full consciousness while your head is no longer attached to your body. And I would know. I've been decapitated before. That's enough time to have some really awkward final thoughts. Back in 1905, a French doctor actually tested this at a real execution. Guy gets guillotined, doctor picks up the head and starts calling the dead man's name. The head opened its eyes twice and looked right at him, then nothing. The doctor timed it at about 30 seconds total, but modern research suggests it's more like 3 to 4 seconds of actual awareness. What happens in Keith's head during those few seconds is pretty wild. The moment that glass cuts through his neck, his blood pressure drops faster than your motivation on a Monday morning. No blood to the brain means no oxygen, and your brain really doesn't appreciate being cut off from its favorite snack. But before Keith's brain shuts down, there's a brief moment of pure panic. The nerves in his neck are screaming bloody murder as they get severed. Sharp glass cutting through skin, muscle, and bone sends every pain signal possible racing toward his brain. Problem is, his spinal cord just got cut in half, so those pain signals have nowhere to go. It's like trying to make a phone call after someone cut the phone lines. The weird part is what Keith might actually experience. For those 3 seconds, he's probably aware that something very wrong just happened. He can see, he can think, he might even try to speak, but no sound comes out because, well, he doesn't have a throat anymore. His brain is basically running on backup power while everything shuts down. Scientists studied this stuff by putting EEG machines on rats and then decapitating them. Yes, that's a real job someone has. They found that brain activity continues for several seconds after the head comes off. The rats showed the same brainwave patterns associated with pain and consciousness. So Keith isn't just having a bad day, he's having the worst few seconds of his entire existence. The production team used a fake head made of fiberglass and painted it to look exactly like actor David Warner. They had to get the timing perfect because they only had one shot at the effect. Meanwhile, the real Keith Jennings is experiencing something no human should ever have to go through, being fully aware that his head is no longer connected to his body. The glass would need to be moving at incredible speed with massive weight behind it to actually pull this off. We're talking about cutting through skin, muscle, vertebrae, and everything else in one clean slice. But assuming the devil's helping out with the physics, Keith gets those horrible few seconds to process what's just happened to him. Unfortunately though, the next death traps victims in an even worse nightmare. In high tension, Daniel thought he was having a normal Tuesday night until a psychopath decided to turn home furniture into a murder weapon. High Tension's bookcase death wins points for creativity and loses points for being absolutely horrible to experience. Picture this nightmare scenario. You're stuck with your head trapped between wooden spindles while someone shoves a massive bookcase at your face. This isn't just decapitation. This is decapitation with a warm-up act. Daniel gets the joy of experiencing two separate types of agony in rapid succession, because apparently one form of brutal death wasn't enough for French cinema. If you're new here and haven't seen much of French horror, the French are up. That's the only conclusion I can come to. Have you seen Titan? She has a baby with Lightning McQueen. That's all the evidence I need. Pregnant car lady. Yeah. Anyways, phase one is the skull crush. That bookcase weighs probably 200 pounds and is moving with serious momentum. When it hits Daniel's head, his skull basically turns into a jigsaw puzzle that nobody's gonna want to put back together. The bones in your skull are tough, but they're not heavy furniture moving at speed tough. Talking about a complete crushing fracture where the bone breaks into dozens of pieces. Your skull crushing generates massive pressure inside your head. All that brain tissue has nowhere to go, so the pressure spikes instantly. This triggers every pain receptor in your scalp and around your skull, the trigeminal nerve, which we met earlier, and it would start firing pain signals at maximum intensity. We're talking about the kind of pain that would normally make you pass out immediately. But Daniel doesn't get to pass out yet because his brain is still technically working, even though his skull just got redesigned by IKEA's most violent employee. The crushing sends bone fragments into his brain tissue while simultaneously destroying the blood vessels that keep everything running. Then comes phase two, the actual decapitation part. Just when Daniel's brain is processing the fact that his head got turned into a stress ball, the bookcase keeps moving and starts severing his neck. Now we're cutting through skin, muscle, major arteries, and his spinal cord, all while his head is already catastrophically damaged. Spinal cord getting cut means all those pain signals from his lower body stop reaching his brain. That doesn't matter because his upper body is still connected and still screaming. Plus, cutting through neck tissue activates even more pain receptors. The nerves in your neck are not happy about being torn apart by furniture. Daniel's consciousness probably disappears during the crushing phase. The massive trauma to his brain from the initial impact likely shuts down his ability to stay awake before the decapitation even finishes. So while this looks like torture, he's probably unconscious for the worst part of it. The French effects team used practical gore to make this scene as disturbing as possible. They wanted viewers to feel sick watching it, and mission accomplished. What makes it extra brutal is the slow, mechanical nature of it. This isn't a quick slice. It's furniture slowly grinding through a human head and neck. Alexandre Aja directed this specifically to be relentless and exhausting for audiences. The whole movie is designed to give you no breaks from violence, and Daniel's death sets that tone perfectly. It's methodical, messy, and makes you wonder who hurt the director as a child. And speaking of impossible physics, our next death breaks every law of nature. Wes Craven made a love story about a robot and a dead girl. The studio watched it and said it needs more exploding heads, and that's how we got the most scientifically impossible death in horror history. A basketball thrown so hard it makes someone's head explode. Let's just address the elephant in the room here. A basketball cannot decapitate a human being. I don't care if you're LeBron James having the best day of his life, you cannot throw a basketball hard enough to make someone's head pop off. I would know, I tried as a kid on my brother. The amount of force required to do this would turn the basketball into rubber confetti before it even reached the target. But let's pretend we live in a world where teenage girls can ball like a motherfucker and throw basketballs at supersonic speeds. What would Elvira experience in her final moments? well, she'd be having the worst day in recorded human history. The basketball would need to hit her head with the force of a small car accident. We're talking about crushing her skull and severing her neck in one shot. That's not a sports injury, that's a physics experiment gone horribly wrong. First, her skull gets completely destroyed. The basketball would shatter every bone in her head instantly. Your skull is tough enough to protect your brain from normal daily activities, but it's not designed to handle projectiles moving at impossible speeds. The bone would crack into hundreds of pieces while her brain gets turned into soup. The pain would be unimaginable for about half a second. Every nerve in her scalp and face would fire at once. Her trigeminal nerve would be sending emergency signals so fast they'd probably overload her entire nervous system. But here's the thing. All this happens faster than her brain can process it. Her cervical spine, that's the neck bones for those of you who skipped anatomy class, would need to be completely severed. These bones are designed to support your head and protect your spinal cord. Breaking them requires a massive force, usually from car crashes or falling off buildings. A basketball doing this is about as likely as winning the lottery while being struck by lightning or me ever getting a girlfriend. None of those are going to happen. The spinal cord getting cut means instant paralysis of everything below the neck. All communication between her brain and body stops immediately. No pain signals from her body can reach her brain anymore. But that doesn't matter because her brain is already shutting down from the massive head trauma. Consciousness disappears almost instantly. The trauma to her brain from the impact would knock her unconscious before she could even register what happened. Her brain goes from thinking about whatever old ladies think about to complete system failure in milliseconds. The movie shows her headless body stumbling around for a few seconds, which is pure Hollywood nonsense. When your spinal cord gets cut at your neck, your body doesn't wander around looking for its missing head. It drops immediately and stays down. Again, I would know. Don't ask questions. Christy Swanson, who played the killer, said they filled the fake head with actual cow brains from a butcher shop. Because apparently the movie wasn't weird enough without adding real animal parts to the mix. What happens when victims can feel every agonizing moment of their destruction? Rory Peters was having a perfectly normal day until death decided to turn farm equipment into a precision cutting tool. Final Destination 2 took barbed wire, something designed to keep cows from wandering off, and turned it into the world's worst magic trick. Also, I know nobody asked, but barbed wire is so useless. It is so bad at doing its job. I grew up on a farm. We had tons of cows. These cows got out all the time. They do not care about barbed wire. I've been pricked by barbed wire. It's like this thick. It doesn't hurt that bad. A cow don't give a shit about barbed wire. Anyways, this death breaks you into 3 deep pieces: upper body, midsection, lower body. It's efficient, it's thorough, and it's medically fascinating in all the wrong ways. Rory becomes a human anatomy lesson that nobody signed up for. The barbed wire hits him moving fast enough to slice through skin, muscle, organs, and bone in all in one go. We're talking about cutting force here that would make a butcher jealous. Your body isn't designed to be divided into thirds, and it really doesn't appreciate when something tries to reorganize your internal layout. Now, most people think getting cut in half means double the pain. Wrong. Rory's experience is exactly the opposite of what you would expect. The moment that wire cuts through his spinal cord, something interesting happens. All the pain signals from his lower body just stop. Again, your spinal cord is the main highway for pain signals traveling to your brain. Cut that highway in half, and everything below the cut goes silent. No more pain messages from his legs, his lower torso, nothing. Those body parts are still attached for a few seconds, but as far as his brain knows, they've completely disappeared. But the parts above the cut, they're having the worst time possible. The wire tearing through his upper body activates every pain receptor in the area. Skin, muscle, internal organs, they're all screaming at once. The nerves that can still reach his brain are sending emergency signals about massive tissue damage. Rory feels the wire slice through his chest and arms with crystal clarity. Every nerve ending that gets cut sends one final pain signal before going dark forever. It's intense, overwhelming, and absolutely horrible. But it doesn't last long because the circulatory system just got terminated with extreme prejudice. When you cut someone's torso in half, you're not just dividing them up. You're destroying their entire blood supply system. The aorta, which is basically your body's main water pipe, gets severed instantly. Your blood pressure is going to be dropping to zero extremely fast, and no blood pressure means no oxygen to the brain. Rory's consciousness has maybe 10 seconds before everything shuts down. His brain is running on fumes while trying to process the fact that most of his body just got deleted by farm equipment. The movie shows him looking surprised for a moment after the impact, which is actually pretty accurate. Those few seconds of shock are real. His brain is still working while it tries to figure out while all the warning lights are flashing red. What makes this death particularly cruel is the delay. Rory has time to understand what happened to him before his brain runs out of power. He can see his body in pieces while his consciousness slowly fades to black. It's not instant, but it's not prolonged torture either. Unfortunately, our next victim discovers that extreme cold brings its own special type of torture. Adrian thought she was dissecting a dead body. Turns out the dead body had other plans. Jason X gives us the rare two-part death where the victim gets to experience both extreme cold and extreme blunt force trauma in rapid succession. If you didn't know, liquid nitrogen is cold, really cold. We're talking negative 321 degrees Fahrenheit, which converts exactly to really cold degrees Celsius. That's cold enough to freeze your spit before it hits the ground. When Jason dunks Adrian's face into this stuff, her skin cells start dying faster than plants in a freezer. The first few seconds are going to be pure agony. Liquid nitrogen hitting your face feels like being slapped with molten metal, except in reverse. Your nerve endings go absolutely crazy trying to process temperatures they were never designed to handle. Every pain receptor in her face fires at once, sending massive warning signals to her brain. But here's the twisted part. The thing that's causing all this pain is also the thing that's about to stop the pain forever. The extreme cold starts killing the nerve endings that are screaming about the extreme cold. It's a self-solving problem in the most horrible way possible. Adrian's facial tissues freeze solid in seconds. The water inside her cells turn to ice, and ice takes up more space than water. The expansion tears apart cell walls from the inside out. Her skin, muscle, and everything else basically gets shredded at the molecular level while she's still conscious. The cold burns through the nerve endings in her face, destroying them completely. After those first few seconds of intense pain, her face goes completely numb. She can't feel anything anymore because there's nothing left to feel. Her face has become a meat popsicle. Then comes part 2 of Jason's home science experiment. He lifts her up and smashes her frozen face against a countertop. Remember how I said her tissues froze solid? Well, frozen biological material has all the structural integrity of a potato chip. The impact shatters her entire head. We're not talking about breaking bones here. We're talking about her head exploding into chunks like a dropped ice sculpture. The bone, brain, tissue, skin, everything just fragments into pieces because it's too brittle to absorb any impact. But here's the mercy in this nightmare. Adrian doesn't feel the impact at all. By the time Jason smashes her face, all the nerves that could register pain are already dead from the cold. Her brain gets destroyed instantly, but there's no pain signal because there's no way to send one. The whole experience lasts maybe 10 seconds total. A few seconds of the worst burning sensation possible, followed by numbness, followed by instant death. Her brain goes from processing unimaginable cold pain to not existing anymore. Mythbusters actually tested this death to see if it was scientifically possible. They confirmed that yes, you can freeze biological tissue solid with liquid nitrogen. And yes, frozen tissue does shatter on impact. Thanks for that valuable research, guys. I really needed it. Unfortunately though, our next victim faces something far more brutal than instant freezing. Emily thought meeting her sister in a crowded restaurant would keep her safe. Because in The Invisible Man, Adrian decided to prove that even surrounded by witnesses, he could still ruin her day in the most public way possible. What makes this death particularly cruel isn't just the method, it's the location. Emily dies in front of dozens of people who all think her sister just murdered her. Adrian gets to kill someone and frame someone else at the same time. The knife cuts deep across Emily's throat, and that's where things get medically interesting. Your neck contains some of the most important plumbing in your entire body. When that blade slices through, it's not just cutting skin. It's severing major highways that keep your brain supplied with blood. The carotid arteries are your brain's main blood supply. You've got 2 of them, one on each side of your neck, pumping oxygenated blood upward. Cut both of those and your brain suddenly finds itself on a very strict diet. No blood means no oxygen. And your brain really doesn't function well when it's not getting fed. Emily feels the knife go across her throat immediately. The pain is going to be sharp and intense because your neck is packed with nerve endings. This isn't like cutting your finger while cooking. This is a deep slash across one of the most sensitive areas of your body. Every nerve in the area starts screaming warnings to her brain. But here's where the countdown begins. Emily has about 10 seconds of consciousness left, not because the pain knocks her out, but because her brain is about to run out of fuel. Those severed arteries aren't pumping blood to her head anymore, and brain cells are surprisingly demanding when it comes to their oxygen supply. The first few seconds are the worst. Emily can still think clearly. She can still see what's happening around her, and she can feel the blood pouring out of her neck. She probably tries to scream or call for help, but cutting through her voice box makes that pretty much impossible. Her blood pressure would plummet faster than a stock market crash. Without those arteries working, there's no way to maintain the pressure needed to keep blood flowing to her brain. It's not going to be a gradual fade. It's a rapid power loss that shuts down her consciousness in stages. Emily's vision starts to blur as her brain cells begin shutting down from lack of oxygen. Her thoughts become fuzzy and confused. The restaurant around her probably starts to look dim and distant. and everything goes black and her brain finally runs out of power completely. The whole process takes about 10 seconds from cut to unconsciousness. 10 seconds might not sound long, but when you're bleeding to death in public while everyone thinks your sister did it, those seconds probably feel much longer. But unfortunately, slow mechanical pressure creates an entirely different kind of nightmare. Because in Scream, Tatum Riley made a critical error in judgment. She looked at a pet door and thought, I can fit through that. Spoiler alert, she could not. What followed was one of the most mechanically brutal deaths in slasher history, courtesy of a garage door that definitely wasn't up to safety code. This isn't a quick death. Tatum gets the joy of experiencing her demise in slow motion as the garage door slowly lifts her body upward until physics decides she's had enough. It's methodical, it's relentless, and it gives her plenty of time to contemplate her life choices. The garage door catches her at the neck and starts applying pressure. Old garage doors can generate serious force. We're talking hundreds of pounds of crushing weight focused on the most vulnerable parts of her body. Her neck gets trapped between the moving door and the solid wood frame above, creating the world's worst vice grip. First, the pressure cuts off her blood flow. Those carotid arteries we keep talking about get compressed completely. Her brain's oxygen supply stops immediately, which starts a timer she can't see. Tatum has maybe 15 to 20 seconds before her brain shuts down from lack of blood. That's not the only problem. The garage door is also crushing her windpipe. Trying to breathe becomes impossible when something is squashing your throat closed. Tatum can't get air in or out, which adds suffocation to her growing list of medical emergencies. The pressure keeps building as the door continues lifting her weight. Her neck bones start to fracture under the crushing force. The cervical vertebrae aren't designed to support her entire body weight, plus the additional pressure from the garage door. So bones would start to crack and splinter. And Tatum experiences this in terrifying detail. She's fully conscious as the pressure builds. She can feel her airway getting crushed shut. She can sense the blood flow to her brain getting cut off, making her feel dizzy and panicked. Every second that passes makes the pressure worse. Her skull starts to fracture at the base where it meets her neck. This is called a basilar skull fracture, and it's exactly as bad as it sounds. The bone that protects her brainstem starts to crack under the massive compression forces. The pain is overwhelming but brief. Every nerve in her neck fires warning signals as the tissue gets crushed, but as the pressure increases, those same nerves get destroyed by the crushing force. The pain signals would literally get squashed out of existence, and ultimately her body goes limp as the crushing pressure finally destroys enough of her nervous system to stop all voluntary movement. The garage door completes its cycle, having turned a simple escape attempt into a fatal engineering problem. But our next death is even more grim because it transforms everyday kitchen equipment into surgical instruments. In your next, Fox Mask picked the wrong kitchen to evade. Aaron grabbed the nearest appliance and decided to make the world's most messed up smoothie. Your next turned a regular blender into a medical procedure nobody even heard of. Let's talk about what happens when spinning metal blades meet human skull at high speed. Spoiler alert, the skull puts up a good fight before losing spectacularly. Blender blades aren't exactly precision surgical instruments, but they'll do the job if you're creative enough about it. The killer gets the blender pressed against the top of his head while it's running full speed. Those blades start chewing through his scalp immediately. Again, your scalp has more nerve endings per square inch than almost anywhere else on your body. Every single one of them starts firing pain signals the moment those blades make contact. Blender blades spin at about 20,000 RPMs, which if you don't understand what that means, it's really fast. And it also sounds really impressive until you realize they're designed for crushing ice, not breaking through bone. The human skull is tougher than a frozen margarita, but Erin's got determination and gravity on her side, so those blades eventually punch through. When the blades finally breach his skull, things get really unpleasant really fast. The bone cracks and splinters, sending fragments flying in every direction. Some of those fragments get driven into his brain tissue by the spinning blades. It's not going to be a clean cut. It's more of a violent excavation project. The sound alone would be horrifying. Imagine the noise a garbage disposal makes when someone accidentally drops a fork in there, except the fork is made of bone and the garbage disposal is attached to someone's head. The victim would get to hear this happening to themselves, which is why I think this death is so grim. His brain would start getting turned into paste by the blades. But again, here's the interesting part. The brain itself can't feel pain, so while his scalp and skull are screaming bloody murder through every nerve they've got, his actual brain tissue is getting destroyed without sending any pain signals. The real agony comes from the meninges, or however you say that word that I've said like 8 times in this video, which are again the protective layers around the brain. They are packed with pain receptors and the blender blades tear through them violently. But this guy stays awake for the worst of it. The brain destruction happens gradually enough that he remains conscious while the blender grinds through his skull. He can feel the vibration, hear the sound, and experience the unimaginable pain from his scalp and protective layers getting shredded. The grinding motion would create massive bleeding inside his skull. Blood would start pooling with nowhere to go, increasing pressure inside his head. This pressure eventually gets high enough to shut down the parts of his brain that keep him conscious and breathing. Death comes from a combination of direct brain destruction and massive eternal bleeding. The whole process maybe takes 15 to 20 seconds from start to finish, and that's enough time for him to fully understand what's happening, but not enough time to do anything about it. But nothing compares to the prolonged agony of our final victim. Here we are. The grand finale, the death that makes everything else on this list look merciful by comparison. Sinister gives us bound victims and a push lawnmower, and enough time for everyone involved to think about their life choices. This isn't just murder. This is going to be prolonged torture. The family members are tied up on the grass, completely helpless, while they watch someone start up a lawnmower and begin walking towards them. Let that psychological nightmare sink in for a moment. They get to see their death approaching at exactly 3 miles per hour. No sudden shock, no instant blackout. Just pure building terror as lawn care equipment becomes an execution method. Lawnmower blades spin at around 200 miles per hour. They're designed to chop grass, not human bodies. But physics doesn't really care what something was designed for. When that much spinning metal hits flesh and bone, the results are catastrophic and drawn out. The first impact is a crushing blow that breaks ribs and damages internal organs. But the victim doesn't die immediately. The lawnmower deck smashes into their torso while the spinning blade starts tearing through skin and muscle. This creates a combination of blunt force trauma and massive lacerations happening at the same time. What makes this the worst death in this video is simple. They stay conscious through most of it. The injuries are severe enough to be fatal, but not severe enough to immediately shut down their brain. They get to experience every second of being torn apart by yard equipment. The blade rips through skin, creating massive tears that expose their internal organs. Muscle gets shredded and pulled apart by the spinning motion. Blood vessels get severed, causing severe bleeding, but not fast enough to make them pass out quickly. The whole process is loud, messy, and takes way too long. Their nervous system goes into overdrive trying to process the trauma. Every nerve that hasn't been destroyed yet fires pain signals continuously. The brain gets flooded with stress signals from multiple sources all at once. It's sensory overload of the worst possible kind. The psychological element amplifies everything. Being tied up means they can't fight back or escape. They have to lie there and take it while a machine slowly destroys their body. The helplessness adds a layer of mental anguish on top of the physical trauma. Massive blood loss eventually causes shock and unconsciousness, but that takes time. The victims remain aware and feeling everything for much longer than any of the previous deaths we've talked about. We're talking about sustained consciousness during active dismemberment. This beats every other death because it combines the worst elements possible: prolonged awareness, massive trauma, psychological terror, and precision. There's no quick escape, no instant shutdown, just sustained agony until blood loss finally provides relief. The movie doesn't show the actual contact. It wisely chose to let your imagination fill in the horrific details. But the science tells us exactly what would happen. It's worse than anything Hollywood could have put on screen. So there are 10 of some of the most disturbing and messed up horror deaths out there. Hope you have good dreams tonight. I don't know why you decided to watch this video, but if you want to watch more content like this, then you should like this video and subscribe to the channel, because I post 3 times a week of content just like this one. And if you need more of that content right now, there's another video right here that's probably equally as messed up.